Our world, our Earth. This is our home, our beautiful blue planet. Or so I thought. For almost 4 decades, I never questioned the notion that we live on a planet, one of those spinning spheres in the vacuum of infinite space. I vaguely knew that people, once upon a time, believed that the Earth was flat. And a few years ago, I vaguely became aware that there were some crazy people that still did so today. Didn't one guy attach himself to a rocket to look at the Earth from up high just to see whether the Earth was flat or not? And didn't he, die, unfortunately? Even though it's obvious, no? A lot of stories that politicians tell are not strictly speaking accurate or even truthful. And I'm sure some scientists are corrupt. This here is just a random example. Different studies showing that, actually, this country is heating up faster than the rest of the world. Actually, no. This part of the world is heating up faster. Or no, this one. I know that sometimes the whole process of scientific research gets weaponized and twisted for politics and big business, etc. I know all that. But come on, flat Earth? Really? I mean, airplanes go around the Earth every day and have been for nearly a century now. And we have people, astronauts in space looking at the Earth right now. How stupid can you be? I tend to be a healthy skeptic, and I like to think I think for myself, but you can't deny what's in front of you. You can't argue with facts. I don't get people like that. So one day I was seriously surprised to hear someone I respect talking about this. Clearly an intelligent man, well-spoken, insightful, thoughtful. I was bemused and also amused, because I happen to think it's good fun to consider different ideas. Of course, I thought, no way. But I was curious enough to say, what are the arguments then, actually? And fast forward to the present, the way I see it now is that the main obstacle to seeing, understanding, knowing that the Earth is indeed not a globe is considering the possibility. So let's check it together. Let's test it. Is the Earth a globe? Now, before I get stuck in, I want to mention that if you are watching this, I am appealing to your sense of logic. I am calling on you to use your brain, your mind, your ability to discriminate between that which makes sense and that which doesn't. Objectively, I have found that in many instances, with regards to many topics, people are instead completely guided by their emotions. It is often impossible and therefore futile to try and have conversations because many people literally don't use their mind. This is not necessarily a criticism. It doesn't mean they are necessarily particularly stupid, and it's not a complaint either. It's just an observation. Think of it like someone who has an addiction or someone who is in a cult. Never mind whether they are intelligent or not, you just can't reason with them. Look, 99% of the people would think there is something wrong with me for even talking about this topic. That's just how it is. As I said, I was in that same mindset once, but I am not addressing 99% of the people. I'm not interested in quantity, but in quality. So, as I enter this topic, which tends to quickly get very emotive, I'm asking you to not let any emotion stop you from using your brain. That's all. I like this quote, whether it's from some Greek philosopher a few thousand years ago or not. It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. I am now inviting you not to accept the thought that the Earth is not a globe. Not that I think there's much danger of that, but instead to join me in entertaining that thought for a while and seeing where it takes you. See where you think what I say adds up, and if that was to be the case, see where you think it doesn't. Also, this is not TikTok or even a 5-minute YouTube video. So if you're very tired or easily bored, please move on, as this will take some time. Let's go. Let's establish some facts. The first fact is that you don't personally experience curvature. Whether we are talking about the supposed globe Earth or about a football, there are no straight lines on a sphere. Yet this is a straight line. You'll agree that you don't ever see the supposed curvature of the Earth for yourself. And that's fine, I get that. The Earth is just that big and we are just that small in comparison. What we call the horizon just seems to be horizontal. But in fact it is curving just ever so slightly. Some people claim they can see the curvature from an airplane.
I flew in Concorde, and I was lucky enough to fly in Concorde, and you get up to 65,000 feet, and I could see the curvature of the Earth. That was proof to me.
And one explanation could be the slight curve of the airplane windows themselves. But I checked the last few times I was on a plane, and I saw, just like on the beach, a horizontal horizon. Admittedly, that's not what you will read or hear everywhere. So for now, let's take this man's word for it, a very qualified astrophysicist who was even awarded the NASA Distinguished Public Service Medal. So he should know what he's talking about.
So if the moon is approximately 50 feet, I think, 30 to 50 feet from here, this would be, to this scale, a mile away. Show us where the International Space Station is, Hubble, etc.
Okay. So if the Earth were actually this size, the International Space Station would be orbiting about a half an inch above the surface. And that dude who jumped out of a perfectly good balloon, what's his name? Felix Baumgartner. He would have been about 2 millimeters above the surface of this globe. That's his edge of space jump. Now, you know, I don't. It's fine. He wants to. I don't have a problem if he does it, but the honesty of it would greatly diminish what I think people thought he was actually doing. And not only that, they made sure to photograph him standing there with a really wide-angle lens, which curves horizontal lines. Right. So in the photo, you see this curvature of Earth's surface, and he said, "Wow, he's in space. Look at that." No, he's not. At that height, you don't see the curvature of the Earth if you are 2 millimeters above this beach ball. You just don't. That stuff is flat.
And this is that man, Felix Baumgartner, who jumped from very high up in 2012, but the astrophysicist we just heard also came out saying that Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson in their 2022 commercial space flights were not high enough to be able to see the curvature for themselves. As he explained, the curve in this picture is not the supposed curvature of the Earth. It's not our entire planet underneath him. It's just part of one American state. It's indeed a type of fisheye lens that produces images like these. or high altitude videos like these, where the curvature of the Earth actually changes depending on how you hold the camera. See? Before and after. Big curve, small curve. The point is that it's even possible to make the sea appear curved on the beach with these lenses, and even though these images feel very familiar, it's just not what our Earth from up high actually looks like. My main starting point is that unless there are hills or mountains blocking your view, the horizon always appears to be horizontal, flat, if you will. This is so whether you are looking at the sea or a huge lake or at the Earth from up high. As we can indeed see from all the footage taken without adaptive lenses from high altitude balloons who float at a much higher altitude than where airplanes fly. And I'd like to leave it at that with these really beautiful images, but unfortunately I can't talk about the curvature without addressing the fact that many people claim they can see boats disappear over the horizon.
We have a saying in science, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So I am now going to make a wild, way out, extraordinary claim. The world is round. For curvature of the Earth horizon model of science! Watch as ships sail away. They don't disappear all at once. No, first, the bottom will disappear. See, the bottom of the ship is gone. Now we can see midway up, and then the whole thing disappears. Now, ships came back. They didn't fall off a table. So people realized that the world is curved. I mean, it's a big curve, but it's curved.
And this is the first problem to me. On a ball, the curve is naturally the same in all directions. So if the curve is so ridiculously big or slight, depending on how you're looking at it, that you can't see it at all, even from miles and miles up in the sky, up there it still seems you are looking at a horizontal horizon. Then how could we perceive boats disappearing in the distance in front of us, at the beach, behind that very imperceivable curve of gigantic dimensions? Doesn't make sense. And that's right, we can't, no matter what Bill Nye, the science guy, says. We have very powerful zoom lenses on some consumer cameras these days, and if you zoom in, ships that had disappeared out of view simply come back into full view. They're still there in direct line of sight. They were there all along. They had not disappeared behind the supposed curve of the Earth. They were just too far for us to see with the naked eye. Obviously, our eyes are limited. You can read a book if you keep it close, but you can't if it's across the room, for instance. I'll come back to the question of how far we can see, even with telescopes, but my first fact remains, which I'm sure we can all agree on. Assuming you don't end up being an astronaut, you won't ever, in your daily life, personally experience the curvature of the Earth. Which brings me to the fact you also don't personally experience motion. The globe Earth circumference is said to be about 24,000 miles. And as the Earth makes one rotation every 24 hours, this means the Earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. On a motorway, the speed limit is 70 miles per hour. 1,000 miles per hour is incredibly fast. That's about 400 meters per second. That's faster than the speed of sound. It's hard to wrap your head around just how fast that is. Now, the globe is supposedly also going around the sun, which is said to be around 90 million miles away. It takes 1 year to go around the Sun, so the whole Earth is moving at all times at around 67,000 miles per hour. 1,000 miles per hour already seemed pretty fast, but 67,000 miles per hour? Just for fun, that is 10 times faster than this thing. I'll say it again, we are supposedly moving 10 times faster than this at all times. And let's not even mention the whole solar system traveling in some random direction at 500,000 miles per hour. All these numbers are incomprehensible. This is supposedly what's happening to us right now. The Earth moving stupidly fast in all sorts of different and changing directions, as the journey around the Sun is said to be elliptical, so we do speed up and slow down as well. But you'll agree, you don't feel a thing. And the water in the lakes, for instance, doesn't seem too bothered either. It's not splashing around wildly as water would normally do when moving in different directions at different speeds. I'll stick to the rotation of the Earth around its own axis, which instantly is a problem to me. Why don't we feel a thing? What does YouTube say? At the top we find a video by someone with a PhD in physics. Let's listen.
Let's physics the hell out of this. Alright, so I'll admit that as we sit here, it is a bit difficult for us to wrap our heads around the fact that the Earth is actually rotating at 1,000 miles an hour. We don't feel that, we feel stationary. And it appears as if the sun and all the stars in the sky are the ones moving and not us. But the thing is, we're all moving with Earth. From the day we were born up until right now, all we've ever known is an Earth that rotates at roughly 1,000 miles an hour. It's never changed its speed. And it's only when the speed changes do you actually feel movement. Think about when you go driving in a car, for example. On a motorway, cruise control on 70 miles an hour. You don't notice that you're moving. You feel stationary sat in the seat in the car. It's only when you change your speed, i.e. you accelerate, or you slam on the brakes, that you all of a sudden become aware of the fact that you were moving. This is one of the most fundamental laws of physics. If you're moving at a constant speed, you're not aware of that movement.
I'll stop her there. I could accept this argument if we were traveling at a constant speed in a straight line, like sometimes on a train, a car or an airplane. But when your trajectory is a circle, you are constantly changing direction. I've seen it described in physics that going around in a circle is in fact a form of acceleration, precisely what she was talking about. But even without arguing about technicalities in physics terminology, in the real world, we can agree this little girl feels motion. These people feel motion while being spun, even at a constant speed. You feel motion in your car if you drive around in a circle, even without accelerating, in inverted commas. So I personally haven't found a logical answer as to why we don't feel the rotating motion of the Earth. But I'm not going to dwell on it right now. For the sake of the point I'm trying to make, it doesn't matter. Where am I going with this? You don't personally experience the rotation of the Earth. And as we said, you don't personally experience the curvature either. So far, I'm sure we still agree. So how do you know that you really are on a globe? Well, you know. Of course you know. Because we figured it out a long time ago, since the time of the ancient Greeks actually, with their sticks and their shadows, and there must be some theoretical stuff I haven't covered yet, some physics or mathematics or I don't know, but I'm sure there are ways to beautifully explain everything. Just ask engineers or physicists or airplane pilots or NASA people, as mostly I've alluded to it in the beginning. Practically, as a collective, as a species, us humans have managed to travel high enough in technological rockets and spaceships to leave our atmosphere where we can breathe, to go to a vast place where you can't breathe, and we've managed to look upon our world from out there. I mean, since the 1960s we have pictures of the Earth, we've seen it from the moon, for crying out loud, and we've had countless space shuttle missions since, and there are satellites and there are missions to the permanently manned International Space Station that feeds live images of our Earth back to us. And that's why, you know, we live on a ball. For flip's sake. Right, time to look into that. The next fact, we're just establishing facts for now. The next fact is that NASA and other space agencies lie and deceive. And this is where you might feel uneasy. You might feel resistance or cognitive dissonance, as some people call it. So, no need to get angry, don't sweat, don't get cocky or agitated, don't panic, it's okay, just breathe. Remember, you're just entertaining an idea and seeing where it takes you. I am claiming that space agencies deceive, and I will demonstrate it. I'm going to start by focusing on 3 points. First is the images of the Earth. As you will see, we are indeed talking about images, not pictures, not photos. That's not technically the part where space agencies are exposed for intentional deception, but it's my starting point. Then I'll look at the moon landings in the 1960s and 1970s, so half a century ago now, and yeah, they were staged. We didn't play golf on the moon. It's ridiculous. And finally, we'll look at what is understood as space exploration ever since up to the present day. I'll show you. This will take some time. I want to be thorough. Let's go. This is not a real photo. Neither is this, or any of these that NASA released in the last few years. Some really don't make sense either. If this is the globe, and nearly half of it is covered by North America, then where is the rest of the land? The Eurasian continent, Africa and Australia, are they all meant to take up as much space as North America? And the images NASA releases tend to vary quite a bit from one to the next. Even the size of continents are not always consistent. Now, listen to this.
In 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. And it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the moderate resolution imaging spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
There was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
and then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
So, strangely, officially, there are only a couple of real photos from the whole Earth. A handful from the 60s, and also one or two more recent ones that were taken from some very, very distant space probe and emailed back to us. But so, I'm just saying, officially, 99% of the pictures of the Earth you may have seen are composite images, or just plain CGI, but they're not photos. As I said, that doesn't mean much right now, but I thought I'd clarify that for you, as you might not have been aware of that. But again, NASA isn't actually denying this or hiding this, so no real problem there so far. Moving on to, I hate to say it, the clear deception of the moon missions. Picking up from what I just talked about, this image is officially one of the few real shots of the entire Earth. It's a still from a camera aboard one of the spaceships about halfway on its way to the moon. I'm going to play a clip of a documentary made in the early 90s somewhere.
And finally, the element that seals their fate. Of all the footage of Apollo 11 requested from NASA over a 5-year period, one gem was discovered just before the completion of this documentary. An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it. In this never-before-seen or heard footage, not only is the radio conversation between the astronauts and Houston Control audible, there is a secondary, private conversation taking place between the crew and a third confidential party, prompting the astronauts with what to say, when to speak, and how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired misleading effect. Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we were saying. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows, as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles. Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with a TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? Furthermore, if they genuinely went to the moon, why would they be faking any part of it? Why this trickery with the window?
So you get it. This is not a photo of the Earth, but neither is this. For some reason, people at NASA lied. They were being deceptive in this instance. Now, surely you've heard of people questioning the veracity of the moon landings for the last 50 years. Now, it's true that the deception with the window is no proof that the moon landings were staged, but the following is.
Photographic anomalies have to be sought out with an understanding of lighting and shadows. The most straightforward is simple. When objects are lit solely by the sun, as all the scenes on the moon were said to be, after all, lighting equipment was not only impractical, it was unnecessary in bright sunlight, then all shadows, regardless of the landscape, will run parallel with one another and never intersect, as shown by this example. In these seldom seen photographs, obtained from a rarely used auxiliary NASA archival site, it is clear that these scenes were lit with artificial light. These shadows, which are cast at different angles, are evidence that a second light source is being used. In addition, the sun would not cause an isolated hotspot like this, only an artificial light would. Again, intersecting shadows and another hotspot. And again. And again. It is simply impossible for this picture to have been taken with sunlight on the moon.
I'll stop the video here again. There is so much more to look at with regards to the supposed moon landings, but I will move on for now. Just have a look and just ask yourself whether this looks like real footage taken in 1969 from a camera attached to some spacecraft close to our rotating moon that has just one man steering it, and the little metal spacecraft you see is about to dock with it, fly really close to it until it's close enough that some mechanical arm or something can grab it, and then the two passengers in the spacecraft will, operate levers to create a vacuum between the two so that they can open the hatch and float gently to be reunited with their friend. And all this is happening at insane speeds, and they're having to make tiny, accurate adjustments through thrusting the craft left and right, all using, radars or sonars or whatever kind of sensors they had in the 1960s, and all this whilst being in the middle of the great infinite void, moments away from certain death if anything at all went wrong? Or does this look like 1960s early special effects, stop-start animation? Be honest, this is fiction. This is science fiction. So some people look at this and agree that the US faked the moon landings and that this was because of political reasons, the race with the Soviet Union and all that, and that this is indeed a misleading of the masses. The masses get lied to about all sorts of things, and often we don't really understand who is behind it, let alone why it is happening, because we are not privy to all the information, and besides, what can we do about it? But this certainly doesn't mean that NASA is faking everything, and it definitely doesn't mean the Earth is flat, which is all true. Just bear with me as we continue. Let's now jump forward to present-day space exploration. Have a look at these clips from people up in the International Space Station, the ISS.
Techme from B-Town, Ontario asked, is it challenging to brush your teeth in space without getting toothpaste up your nose from weightlessness? Well, let's talk about how to brush your teeth in space. Standard toothbrush, nothing magical there. But we got a few different things. We don't have running water. You can't have a tap. You can't have a sink because water would flow everywhere. And so what do you do to wet your toothbrush, and where do you spit afterwards? Those are the big questions.
Astronaut Scott Kelly is halfway through his year-long mission on board the International Space Station, and he joins me now from the ISS. Here's the last dorky question I'm going to ask you, sir. Do you ever get tired of doing flips up there?
Not really. I don't get tired of it. You definitely get better at it. The longer you're up here, to where
Great form, sir.
you can, and I can do them, even much faster and do a lot of them. So you definitely get like Olympic caliber flip technique after you've been up here for a long time.
That is really cool.
And now, have a look at this clip from a comedy show.
Howie?
Hey, there's my beautiful bride. Can you see me?
I can. How are you?
I'm amazing. I mean, this is even better than I dreamed. Yeah, I look out the window and it's all so unbelievable.
Good for you. I just had a seemingly endless dinner with your mom.
Oh, yeah? That's nice.
It was. Until I found out you never told her we're not going to live with her. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Hey, look, this pen is floating. How crazy is that?
So most people would argue that the difference between the former clips and the latter one is that the latter one is made for entertainment. using special effects to make it seem like the actor is weightless in space, in a spacecraft, whereas the former ones are actual real footage. Well, I am claiming, apart from the fact that people consider the latter one to be entertainment, that there is no real difference. The former clips also use special effects to make it seem like the actors are weightless in space in a spacecraft. Yes, I am claiming it's fake. And again, stay calm please. Just like with the moon landings, I will simply show the deception. It's pretty obvious, as you will see. So, as you've seen, the astronauts, love to do a little backflip for entertainment after doing an interview where they talk about very serious science that could change our understanding of the entire workings of the universe and everything which is very important to our lives here on Earth. Here goes famous astronaut Tim Peake. Did it seem like something went wrong there? It's almost as if he fell at the end, which wouldn't be possible in space, right? See? Boom. Or here, the one on the right, it's almost as if his foot gets stuck in something. Look again. What's happening with his leg there? Maybe he just had a cramp. But the next guy also seems to struggle with one leg, almost as if it was entangled in something invisible. And what's he doing with his right hand?
Chris Hadfield, giving it to us again. I don't know what's going on here, Chris. Maybe you could explain to us, like why you have these little bumps on your back. Can't be a harness though. There's no way.
So in this clip, someone's claiming that the astronauts are wearing harnesses. Couldn't be, could it? Like that? Could it be that the astronauts are wearing harnesses to fake weightlessness? No, come on. Another clip from space. I mean, they really love to show off their backflips. Wait, what happened there? What's the man on the right holding on to? Let's watch that again. So, they've actually just been asked, how do you prove to skeptics that you really are in space and that you are not in a studio? The lady says, see the hair. As in, that's proof. Now, in my view, it could just as easily be strong hairspray, as her hair hardly moves at all. Whereas the man on the left, as proof of being in space, does his backflip. Of course, that's what they always like to do. And the man on the right in the picture seems to steady him in place by grabbing and pulling something that isn't there, but is clearly attached to the backflipping guy. One more time. This time, look at the guy on the left, on top, there. As the other guy starts his backflip, he notices something's going wrong with the wires. He reaches to steady something, and then the guy on the right pulls him towards him. And the backflipping guy looks down. Is everything okay? They're busted. They're lying.
They're actors. And we're building them up higher than your father, police, military, all these people that are actual heroes. Right. These are actors working for a government agency. So.
Next.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm going to get one of these signed if that's all right. My name's Justin.
Justin?
Yes.
IN?
Yes, with an IN.
Where are you from, Justin?
Orlando.
Oh, so you're not far from home.
Not too far. No, I'm okay on a picture, but thank you. I do have a question though.
Sure.
Sometimes when we're watching the ISS footage, you'll see the astronauts sometimes connected to like wires and harnesses. Is that to keep them like in the frame during the broadcast, or what's the reason for that?
No, I haven't actually. You mean while they're inside the shuttle?
Yeah, like when they're inside the ISS, sometimes during the feeds, the broadcast, you'll see kind of
yes,
pulling on their belts or something like that.
I bet that is.
Like that.
I bet that is. I have not personally seen that.
Oh, wires and harnesses. Is that to keep them like in the frame during the broadcast, or what?
So, you've seen it for yourself now. At least some of what is broadcast on news channels, etc., is a deception of the masses. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you are struggling to come to terms with this. It's quite natural. Could it really be that Hollywood-style productions are used to lie to pretty much everyone? How would this even be possible? Let's watch some guy's video about editing out wires. So it's really not that difficult to do. If some kid with a laptop can do it. But as we saw before, sometimes there are mistakes in the video manipulation process. And it's not just all about wires. As he floated into the next room, that guy became transparent. How about that? Watch it again. You can see right through him. And here, this actress has just finished her interview. Watch what happens. The next guy gets faded in. He's not even in that room. He's not there. He's in a studio somewhere. There are several image layers superimposed.
It is a real honor to be able to touch base with the International Space Station.
Here's another one by the Chinese Space Agency. Another layer that gets faded in. Apparently, the Chinese also have transparency superpowers. And this one really shows you there are several layers. The actors are not in the same room there with this machinery. You see, during transmission, at one point the image distorts, but only of the patch. It's only the actors and some other objects they put in front of a green screen somewhere in a studio that distorts. These guys are not in space, okay? Watch it again. A few patches distort, but everything else stays clear. Next, augmented reality. Interacting with virtual objects in 3D to give the illusion of objects floating in space. It's just funny that in this picture the fruit isn't floating.
So in this clip, they're talking live feed, and we have a astronaut go by us in the background, obviously trying to give it a more realistic, spacey, station busy effect. The only problem is the camera that was supposed to mask this harness out, or the video feed, is not working. And so we see the guy come flying along in a harness on his wires. Pretty amazing. But that's not all that goes wrong here. Okay, so you see to the right, this guy's flipping this hat. This hat's actually on another video channel in 3D space. It's virtual reality. They're wearing augmented contact lenses so that they can interact with these 3D objects. Now, in this scene, the guy on the left in the green shirt, he thinks he sees an object in 3D space that's being broadcast to him. So he grabs it and he puts it off to the side. He's looking straight ahead because he's looking at an object rotating in front of him, but the video channel is down that is supposed to show the viewers what we're supposed to see, and so we don't actually get to see the object that he is seeing. And I would just sum this up as a very terrible, bad, horrible day for NASA doing live feeds.
Same with this. How do you know that this beach ball Earth is really in the room with him, especially as it glitches? And another beach ball Earth. The cartoon version of the supposed globe Earth really gets pushed upon us, doesn't it? It's in every classroom in the world. Anyway, here it's obvious they can indeed play with video layers as the actress physically holds an object that, a second ago, wasn't even in the same room as her. It just gets beamed in. This is a clip as part of so-called education for children. And all this really shows is you can't trust what you're being shown without scrutiny. Another one, an older one, the actor is showing how he drinks his coffee in space. He made a little cup out of plastic, but then the coffee layer ends up outside of his cup. And another one, he's singing and playing the guitar, but the microphone, again it's a video patch, there are several layers, the microphone ends up inside his neck, stabbing his throat. When it's live, these kind of mistakes sometimes happen. And another editing mistake, do you remember the first video? He was going to brush his teeth, and at one point they fast forward the video while he's brushing, but they forgot to change the speed on that floating pouch of water in the background. It just keeps floating at the same speed. There's also falling objects when everything should be weightless. There are people falling. See, there are several techniques. Zero-G planes are also used to simulate space. What else? There's a fly on board the space station? Of course there is. There's even a fly in space, as in outer space, as it turns out. Then this one's a bit older, from the 80s or the 90s.
And that is not a model. I'm not a forensics expert, but I've seen more impressive models. I've built more impressive models. And are those supposed to be like solar panels? Like I've never seen, they just look like white cardboard. This is obviously a model, right? If you can't see that, then you're suffering from space credulity. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at it. Just look. This is plastic. This is a plastic model. They didn't even try, right? Look at this. Like, look at the back. It's just like a cutout of tin. I can make this. I can do better. I can do better. No doubt about it. I think that's a Coke can.
And a final one. I can't show everything I could find or will be here all day. Often people say, how can you say the Earth is flat? There is footage of the Earth taken from the ISS being broadcast live. Well...
Hey everybody, it's Sean Hilbler from Hill Productions. I was watching the ISS quote-unquote live, and check this out. pay attention, right in this area. Whoop. I mean, for the love of God. If you guys still think this shit's real, just unfollow me.
And maybe you're still wondering. Okay, NASA and the European Space Agency and the Chinese, but didn't the Indians just go to the moon recently?
India has become the fourth nation to safely land a spacecraft on the moon, following the United States, Russia, and China, where few have gone before. India is also the first to land its Chandrayaan craft near the moon's south pole.
I mean, this is the footage in 2023. They are choosing to share with the world about their great technological achievement, which is, again, I'm sure going to make everyone's lives better. But what about the private companies now, like SpaceX, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson? Don't these billionaire business people go to space with their friends? It seems like great fun. First of all, SpaceX are in partnership with NASA, so that says enough. Look, they tell you that this here is real. We have liftoff.
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. We'd have way better CGI if it was fake.
Is that so? Elon Musk talking about faking stuff with CGI. Does this look real to you? I mean, all of this space stuff really is nonsense. Look at this. A nice welcome image of the real world. Maybe you remember from when you were a child playing with a remote control car. And with a powerful one, you might end up steering the car all the way in the distance to the very end of the road. So my question is, do you really think that there is some person with a PhD in mechanical, intergalactic, theoretical, metaphysical engineering in Houston, Texas, playing with a remote control car on a red rock 50 million miles away? To put that in perspective, to cross the Atlantic Ocean, that's about 3,000 miles. 50 million miles. Can you see the ridiculousness of it all? That is one powerful remote, isn't it? 50 million miles away. My son commented that sometimes the Wi-Fi doesn't even reach his bedroom. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi boosters on asteroids every few million miles. And I mean, we're spinning and flying at insane speeds all the time. It must be a nightmare to keep the remote facing the right direction.
Last week, NASA, the biggest black-budget black hole in existence, sucking in $52 million of American taxpayer money every single day, just spent $2.3 billion of your dollars to allegedly land a remote control car on Mars for the 5th time. Yes, the multi-billion-dollar charade of landing on Mars has been happening since 1976, and thanks to the gullible, unquestioning masses enthralled and duped by these ridiculous Hollywood performances, they will most likely continue for decades to come. To begin with, the tiny reddish circular light in the sky known as Mars is not a spherical terra firma world millions of miles away capable of landing a rover on. All of the so-called planets were known to the ancients as wandering stars, because they differ from the fixed stars in their relative motions only. To them, stars were not spherical worlds millions of miles away, or suns trillions of miles away, as we are brainwashed to believe they are today. Stars were and are simply luminaries, immaterial lights in the sky, several thousand, not millions, of miles away, that revolve over and around the Earth. The Masonic magicians at NASA and the other world space agencies, using lying actor-nauts and Hollywood tricks like green screens, wires, harnesses, and endless amounts of CGI images, through pseudoscience books and programs, mass media and public education, universities and government propaganda, have systematically indoctrinated the entire world into believing what is nothing but an elaborate piece of science fiction. As you can clearly see for yourself with a bit of research, a telescope or high-zoom camera, and an open, discerning mind actually honestly admitting to yourself what is and what isn't a CGI, computer-generated image, it is obvious that the light in the sky known as Mars is not some science fiction desert planet millions of miles away. The CGI images NASA shows of a spherical world are clearly and admittedly not photographs, and look nothing like Mars when seen through a telescope. Meanwhile, the actual photographs NASA claims are coming from this completely other world look exactly like they are coming from Devon Island, Canada, with a red tint added in post-processing. There is nothing being shown in NASA's photographs of Mars that cannot easily be faked on Earth, and given the lack of skepticism or scrutiny from the gullible masses, they barely have to fake any evidence too. Just give them a computer screen of a CGI parachute with a CGI rover landing on a CGI Mars, and film a bunch of compartmentalized NASA 20-something employees straight out of space camp getting giddy and high-fiving each other, and that is literally all it takes. The unquestioning masses now thoroughly believe NASA has landed their fifth remote control car tens of millions of miles away and are receiving photographs from it through the internet. Yes, that's right. How do you think NASA sends and receives all data to and from this remote control car? They apparently have internet technology so strong and fast that they can operate a remote control vehicle from tens of millions of miles away. Do we, the public, have any independent evidence whatsoever that such technology actually exists? Of course not, and it isn't necessary. Again, because the science fiction indoctrinated masses are so bedazzled by their pseudoscientific priests at NASA that they don't require things like proof or evidence.
Nothing flies or floats or whatever at 6.66 miles per second. All talk of space is nonsense, trickery, theory, cartoons, propaganda. It's hard to put into words what's actually going on. And I know it's hard to accept because all of your life you've believed what you've been told from when you were a child. Next to children's books and cartoons and toys about space and movies, etc., next to all that, this kind of rubbish is in the news all the time. Most people just don't pay attention to it. When is the last time you've had an interesting conversation with a friend about the technicalities involved in NASA missions? It doesn't happen. People don't care. And rightly so. It's a kind of background propaganda. But I digress. It takes a bit of time to adjust, but if you digest this, think about it, do some research, trust your own senses instead of what some outer authority tells you, you will unequivocally agree with the fact I wanted to establish and demonstrate here, which was that so-called space agencies lie and deceive. But not being able to perceive or experience the roundness or the spin of the Earth and space agencies lying still do not constitute satisfactory proof that the Earth is not a globe. Mind you, it's not easy to prove a negative. The burden of proof really should be on proving that the Earth is a globe, but that's not where we're at right now. Remember, in the very beginning I said, let's test it. Let's test the globe. Let me take a moment to explain my method, if you will. I am not a Buddhist or a Hindu or anything, but at some point in my younger years I became intrigued by Eastern philosophies. I like to learn from many different places, and some of what I read was useful or interesting to me, some less so, and some I even consider to be incorrect. But one thing that stayed with me was the notion that truth doesn't come easy. And this is in contrast to misunderstandings which occur spontaneously. You often have to make an effort to determine whether something is true or not. And according to what I learned and considered, we have three means to come to truth at our disposal to do so. Namely, our own senses. Can we see, hear, taste, smell or touch it? Valid testimony, as in you can ask someone who is reliable and some kind of authority on a subject. If you want to know about sourdough bread, ask a baker. If you want to know about cars, ask a mechanic. And finally, reasoning. But each of these three means is fallible. Your senses are not optimal in certain circumstances, or you can misinterpret what they tell you. Others can make mistakes too, or can turn out not to be reliable, and you can make mistakes in your reasoning. So, wherever possible, it's best to cross-reference and not rely on only one of the means. So what we're doing here is checking the validity of the statement, the Earth is a globe. We've established that we can't rely on our senses to tell us the statement is true. If anything, our senses tell us the opposite, as in we're not moving and the horizon is horizontal. But fine, it could be that our senses are too limited somehow. Some people, i.e. astronauts, should be able to speak with authority on this, as they have supposedly been able to experience the globe for themselves, but we have established they are not reliable. They have shown themselves not to be of the highest integrity, and accepting blindly what comes from a source like that is not very smart. And I'm not even considering theoretical physicists as authorities on the subjects, as, well, I'm not interested in theories, I am looking at facts. So we can't rely on any valid testimony either, because we don't have any. So all we have left is reasoning. Well, let's reason. This is where I want to establish the last fact, namely that the heliocentric model makes no sense. The official model of our supposed universe, the way the ball Earth goes around the sun, the theory of gravity, all of that makes no sense. So to demonstrate that, I'll make it like a YouTube video. These are my top 10 reasons as to why the heliocentric model makes no sense. I'll try and make it snappy, I'll definitely fail, but here we go. 1. Not being able to observe or measure curvature doesn't make sense. This is the main argument when it comes to the Earth not being a globe, in my view. We can see too far. We established that we can't personally observe any curvature. Even from super high altitude balloons, the horizon is horizontal. Now, again, if you look for images of amateur high altitude balloons, you will see lots of pictures of a curved Earth. But remember, that's the lens. Have a look at this image here, for instance. Well, a bit further, in a similar shot, the Earth is actually concave instead of convex because of the lens. Amazing. So, we supposedly can't observe any curvature because the Earth is just too vast. But mathematically, this doesn't add up. As you will see, you should be able to see a curve, not only from up high, kind of like in the image above, but even on the ground, say at the beach or by a lake. Because of course there are hills and mountains and valleys, but a body of water is always level. Now, supposedly on the ball Earth, level water actually means curved water, bendy water. So let's look out for this bendy water. Can we experience, can we measure, can we test the curve? Say, if visibility was not an issue, as in it's a particularly clear day, here on this ball Earth of exactly 24,859.734 miles circumference, at what point in the distance would an object start disappearing behind the curve? Surely you wouldn't be able to see the Statue of Liberty in New York from the west coast of Ireland or Portugal. Let's settle it. How big is this curve meant to be? In other words, how far away is the horizon? Because that's what we're being told the horizon is. The physical place where, from one's viewpoint, the Earth starts curving. Well, we can find that out. The maths have been done. Obviously, it's not that difficult. And so the Earth supposedly drops or curves at a rate of around 8 inches per mile squared. Therefore, the horizon really shouldn't be that far. There are even tools on the internet. Look, Earth Curvature Calculator. So if you are 6 foot tall, the horizon should be 3 miles away. That's it. It's not that far at all. So in practice, again, in the real world, we should start seeing objects fully or partially be hidden behind the curve, just a few miles away from the coast. But what is that in the distance? These are the cliffs of Dover in England as seen from France. And this here is the skyline of Chicago in the United States as seen from across Lake Michigan. So let's look at the White Cliffs of Dover. This picture is clearly taken at the beach because of course the height of the observer matters, and we go back to our curvature calculator. We're 6 foot tall, the horizon is still 3 miles away, and Dover is 26.34 miles away. Now remember, the horizon is only 3 miles away, the cliffs are 26 miles away, so anything at that distance should be hidden by 110 meters or about 360 feet. That's the height of a pretty decent skyscraper, or actually, that's pretty much bang on the height of the cliffs. In other words, according to globe math, the entire cliffs should be hidden. You should not be able to see England at all from the beach in France if we live on a ball with a circumference of 24,000 miles. You should only be able to see the sea in front of you. But you can see England from France. Doesn't make sense. The skyline of Chicago. Let's listen.
This photo from Grandmere State Park. This is from Joshua Nowicki, and what you're seeing here is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting here. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky up in space. But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore. Very fascinating.
So, having seen this on TV, some guys who lived nearby got on a boat. They testified that, depending on the weather conditions of course, they often see the city of Chicago from the other end of the lake 40, 50, 60 miles away. So from close to the city, they navigated back to their starting point, and obviously it got less and less clear, but the city was in full view all the time.
Do that every day on this boat?
No.
Man, I did not think you were going to rock, brother. That smoothly.
And we were about 8 nautical miles off the coast of Chicago there, and didn't really see any need to go any further. We saw everything we needed to see, and we were running kind of late, needed to get back, and actually running a little bit low on fuel too. So I said, yep, just head back. I'm going to set up some cameras and point them at the city so we could watch it the whole way back and show everybody that it's not a mirage. That's the proof right here. That's the proof.
Absolutely.
Now, the weatherman on TV said he got a huge amount of correspondence from viewers who claimed that this is not a mirage and instead proved that, yeah, there is no curvature and therefore the Earth is flat. He did a follow-up video and he actually agreed that it's not a mirage. Mirages are these kinds of mirrored reflections either above the objects. Those are superior mirages, or below, inferior mirages. But he said it's semantics, the image is still due to atmospheric refraction, and of course the Earth isn't flat. So what that says to me is that according to the experts, you can see over the curve. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm walking up a hill, I can't see what's on the other side. So unless you show me a science experiment where in some kind of a box you put a camera on one side of a ball and there's an object on the other side of that ball, and only using gases like oxygen and steam or whatever, and maybe you introduce magnetism or I don't know, but somehow the object on the other side shows up in full view of the camera, unless you show me that, in my mind, for now, I will keep atmospheric refraction in the theory section as opposed to the fact section. I'm not saying there are no optical phenomena at all in our atmosphere, visible close to the surface. Again, these kinds of upside down mirror images, or this kind of compression of the surface, or here, this man has no feet, that car has no tires. This has obviously nothing to do with the curvature of the Earth. Here you see two images taken from the same spot but on different days. What is close to the surface in the distance will often distort in some way or other, while naturally the more elevated you are, the more objects you will see in the distance. Look at this here. The camera is placed exactly in line with the tabletop. But as the coin moves away, the bottom gets blurry. He does it several times, same with a larger circle. And this would possibly explain the perception of a boat disappearing hull first. Also, some pictures just show boats hidden by big waves. And in the images I found from France looking at Dover, the top one is clearly taken from an elevation. If you compare them, you can see the same thing as with the man with no feet. As in, the base of the cliffs seem to merge with the sea. The top picture is not so close to the surface, and so more of what is in the distance is clear. Like on this road, the higher you go, the clearer the objects in the distance. So there's a lot to be said about how our perception works. And it can get tricky, but I'll get back on track. Ignoring the globe maths, again, some people will pick this out and say, no, you can't see the base of the cliffs in the bottom picture because it's behind the curve of the Earth. Like here. Look, unsurprisingly, there are people who take great offense when people claim the Earth isn't the globe. And there are entire websites dedicated to ridiculing them. It really often gets personal. There's a lot of name calling. So here I read, the skyline of Toronto, this is a comparable example to the Chicago one, is often cited by flat earthers, there's the name calling, because it can be seen from miles away in Lake Ontario. The fact that half the city is underwater is apparently lost on them. And there's a little animation. I'll zoom in on it. At first sight, it looks convincing, but it's disingenuous. To me, this is about optics, as I said. But so, if half of the city is below the horizon on the other side of the curve, I'll go back to my little diagram here. Can we measure these things? How far is the city? How far is the horizon from the viewer's point? And so, what is the percentage of what is hidden? And if the city is hidden by this or that much, then by how much would an object halfway be hidden? And a third of the way, etc. Can it be tested and repeated? Because that is science. Going back to this picture of Dover, cutting through the nonsense, like we established in the beginning, we shouldn't be arguing what percentage of the cliffs are hidden. The crux of the matter is that you shouldn't see the cliffs at all. They should be completely hidden. Let's put this to bed. There are dozens and dozens of videos you can watch of people doing experiments whereby the horizon clearly is much further than 3 miles, and or where objects are clearly visible when they should be completely hidden. And whether separate objects are spaced 3 miles away, or 5 miles, or 10 miles, or whatever, there is no curvature to be detected ever.
The target is Rampion Wind Farm, situated over 8 miles off the Sussex coast near Worthing and Shoreham. The whole complex covers over 27 square miles of sea. Dr. John's observation point will be here. The main target is the last 6 turbines to the west, marked in red. Each of the turbines are numbered 1 to 6. The first is over 8 miles away from the observation point. The 6th is over 11 miles. The wind turbines are massive structures. Each of the 3 blades are 55 meters long. To the middle turbine section, it's 80 meters. Overall, they are 140 meters in height. The base of the turbines and the loading platforms are the observation's reference points. The base is 5 meters in diameter. The high tide marks on the bases are easy to distinguish on the yellow background. They come up from the sea about 2.5 meters. The loading platform is approximately 12.5 meters from its base to the sea below. If we live on a ball with a radius of 6,371 kilometers, or 3,959 miles, At Dr. John's planned observation height above the sea of 3.5 feet, just over 1 meter. The horizon will be 2.3 miles away, 3.7 kilometers. Turbine 1. At a distance of 8.4 miles, 13.5 kilometers, the hidden height from the sea should be 24 feet, 7.6 meters. Turbine 2. 28 feet, 8.6 meters. 3. 32.7 feet, that's 10 meters. Turbine 4. Hidden by 37.6 feet, 11.5 meters. 5. 48 feet, 14.7 meters. And Turbine 6 will be hidden by 53 feet, just over 16 meters. The loading platforms of turbines 5 and 6 should not be visible from Dr. John's position. The tide marks on all 6 turbines will all be obscured by the horizon. The camera tripod is placed into position. The center of the camera lens will be 3.5 foot, just over 1 meter from sea level. To his rear, the beach houses and Worthing Sailing Club are about 300 meters away. Conditions are better than expected. The sun is low in the sky, it sets in 40 minutes. He has hardly any wind at his back. All the wind farm is visible with the naked eye. It's time for the observation.
You understand what you're seeing, right?
This new proof of the flat Earth comes from Grota 1 from a frozen lake in Manitoba, Canada. I strongly encourage everyone to head over to his channel and subscribe to show your support, because he obviously went to a lot of effort for truth here. For this curvature test, Grota 1 essentially set 4 lights at around 1 foot above the water and ice. He set up his camera at about 8 miles away from the furthest light and 5 miles away from the closest light. The lights were spread out at about a mile apart. At each location, Grota 1 drilled down to the water just to confirm that he wasn't on some irregular ice formation, and to also ensure that his test was on a level surface. The furthest light from the camera was the red light at 8 miles from the camera. The blue light was at about 7 miles, the yellow was at 6 miles, and the orange light was the closest one at 5 miles away from the camera. You should definitely watch his video where he goes into much more detail, but here he is sitting in his truck at a distance of 8 miles from the red light. Notice that the lights are all on the same flat plane. There is no Earth bulge and no physical globe horizon. Next, Grota 1 lowered his camera to only 12 7/8 inches above the surface. At that small elevation, the globe horizon would have to be closer than 1.27 miles, and the furthest light, the red one, should have been 29 feet below the horizon. That's taking into account the 1 foot height of the light. Notice how the lights are all on the same flat plane. There's absolutely no supposed bulge here. And if there is no curvature on that frozen lake, then there is no Earth curvature anywhere. Look at the red light. That light should be 29 feet below the horizon.
Just to hammer this home, here's another one.
This is the #1 globe killer. Hopefully by now, all of you have seen this video by BMLSB69. His observer height is only 1 foot. Now that first platform is 6.2 miles away, and platform habitat is 9.4 miles away, with the horizon far in the distance beyond that. Now I'm going to let you just sit there and take this in, because this is the absolute #1 globe killer. Modus tollens states, if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. If P, we live on a globe of radius 3959 miles, then Q, every horizon distance measurement cannot be more than 1.23 miles times the square root of the observer height in feet. Not Q, the geometric horizon is far greater than 2.73 miles for 5 foot. Therefore, not P. The Earth is not a globe.
It's obvious, no? If you had no emotional attachment to the globe, you would agree that this is obvious. Maybe you should do the experiments for yourself. And for the sake of completeness, back to Chicago. These guys had the city in their line of sight all the way from being close to the city to being 40 miles away or more. As we've seen, there is no curvature to be measured anywhere. So the official line is that the image nearby, of course, is real. Whereas the image on the other side is an image that reflected on the atmosphere somehow and got re-inverted to look like the real thing in its right place. So if they had the city in view the whole time, did some kind of seamless fade in, fade out effect happen in the sky to make it seem like they had the buildings in view, whereas in fact they didn't? At what point were they seeing something real? And at what point did it become a mirage? It's nonsense. But it's what you'd have to believe. This guy I'm about to play next makes a funny point.
We've covered presupposed Earth radius, pressure without a container, angular resolution, perspective hijacking Earth curve. We've covered Boyle's law. We've covered diffraction limit. The one thing we haven't touched on was mirages. Give us the most ridiculous excuse of a mirage that you've had.
Well, the mirage is an interesting one because this is probably one of my favourite points to make as a flat earther, especially when someone says there's no proof of flat Earth. So I'll give you an example. We'll use Ranty and one of his images. So he has a picture of a clock tower at about 20 miles at Barrow-in-Furness, and it's just a picture of a clock. Now, as a flat earther, I look at this picture and say, clock at 20 miles. That's the end of my explanation. As a flat earther, I can make that statement. I'll say it again. Clock at 20 miles. Now, if you're a fundamentalist religious zealot, then that's not a clock at 20 miles. That would be a slightly looming, non-standard refraction hyena holographic projection of a clock from behind the reified edge of a sphere based on an R value and a begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator to turn a clock which seems to be there into a clock which is not actually there. That's what you have to assert if you're a globehead. So it's not a clock, it's a holographic projection of a clock from behind the reified edge of an Earth curve based on a begging the question proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator. As opposed to me, that's a globehead explanation. I say clock, 20 miles.
You're the man, Nath. You are the man. I love the way it's the way you taste, the way you say it.
So I could leave it at that. I shouldn't be making a feature-length presentation on the shape of the Earth. We can see too far. End of conversation. Goodbye. But I've started now, so let me finish this. No one factors in the curve, let alone the speed of the moving Earth. Airplane pilots, construction workers, engineers. The curve is a theoretical concept. Nothing about curvature makes sense. Moving on. 2. Not feeling the spin doesn't make any sense. I said it before. Again, when you're watching a sunset, for instance, you're supposedly falling backwards at nearly 1,000 miles per hour. In the real world, when you spin, you feel it. You feel the direction in which you're spinning. These people feel pushed forward and to the left. If they turned around in their seat, they would feel pushed backwards and to the right. And water, for instance, doesn't stay still when it's spinning. It's not like in those quiet lakes. That's all I'm going to say on that. I can't find an explanation as to why we're not feeling anything. Logically, we should. It doesn't make sense. 3. The atmosphere spinning. Makes no sense. So, some more about airplanes first of all, because it gets you to practically think of these things. Say, a flight from North America to Europe somewhere. It's not on the equator, so the Earth is only moving at, whatever, let's say 700 miles an hour. Airplanes fly, say, at 500 miles an hour. On the runway, the airplane is moving at 700 miles per hour as it is moving with the Earth. So, say, as it takes off, in effect it's being catapulted into the air, and let's not think of air resistance. Let's say that it stays in motion at 700 miles per hour during the flight. It's keeping up with the Earth plus the 500 miles per hour it's actually moving because of its engines. So it's moving at 1,200 miles per hour while the Earth moves at 700 miles per hour. And then it slows down and lands fine. Now, consider the other way around. Europe to North America. On the runway, the plane is moving at 700 miles per hour backwards with the Earth. So if it flies west at 500 miles per hour, in effect it's moving east at 200 miles per hour. It's not even going west at all. It's going backwards. But as the Earth is rotating towards the plane, eventually America will appear. Is it that America is going towards the plane faster than the plane is going backwards? Is that how it works? I don't know, that's weird. Like so many things I'm talking about here, I'm sure you've never thought about that, right? And it gets you thinking of a helicopter or a drone. It's not as if when something is hovering that the Earth spins underneath it, away from it at 1,000 miles an hour. If you jump in one spot, you don't land somewhere else. But here's a first real problem. North-south airport runways. And there are many of those on the Earth. Back to my sketchy sketch. Imagine a runway north-south instead of east-west. So instead of just landing, first the plane has to turn 90 degrees. But planes can't fly sideways. So in the America to Europe scenario, plane is moving at 1,200 miles, Earth is moving at 700 miles, but to land north-south, the plane and the runway would have to line up. They both have to be moving at 700 miles per hour. But so the airplane would in effect have to stop. We said it's already moving at 700 miles an hour, so its actual speed would need to be 0, but that's not possible. A plane is not a helicopter. It needs to fly forward to stay in the air. Or it would have to approach the runway at an angle and calculate how fast the Earth is spinning. I said earlier that pilots don't consider curvature. Their instruments just tell them whether they are level or not. But no pilot ever considers the speed of the Earth either. Landing in Europe would be completely different from landing at the equator or from landing closer to the North or South Poles, where the Earth is supposedly rotating quite slowly. And if you think of an actual north-south flight, whatever, say from Norway to Congo, as I'm saying, the speed on the ground is massively different between departure and destination. So as the plane flies, how does the plane speed up or slow down sideways? And that's what I mean. A spinning atmosphere makes no sense. Of course, there is wind. Sometimes the air moves in all possible directions. But if there is no wind that day, smoke just goes straight up. A drone can go straight up unless you maneuver it left or right. So the atmosphere must be keeping up with the Earth. I guess if it wasn't, we'd have 1,000 miles per hour winds. But so, forgetting about wind, it's as if every point in the atmosphere is supposedly moving along with the Earth in such a way that it seems like it isn't. Makes me think of our curvature chat.
We will say at this moment we expect all of these points of air to make one complete revolution and come back to the same spot in 24 hours, right? Because the atmosphere moves with the Earth. The atmosphere never gets left behind. So right off the bat, since we know the velocity is equal to distance divided by time, we can say that VA, the velocity of point A, is greater than the velocity of point B, which is greater than the velocity of point C. Because point A has a longer distance to travel in 24 hours than point B, and point B has a longer distance than C, because the circumference of their path is greater, right? So I've got A up here at the edge of the atmosphere, space up here, B right here around 6 miles where planes fly, and C near the surface of the Earth, okay? And so this rotation here, the theory is that the Earth is rotating about its axis because of the Big Bang. When you really think about it, there was this Big Bang, and everything exploded out into space, planetary systems formed, galaxies, all that stuff formed, and this rotation is what is left over from that explosion. That's leftover energy from that explosion of the creation, which created everything, right? And so everything's just been moving for billions of years, and there's no friction between space and the atmosphere, right? Because there's nothing in space, so an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, right? But that's kind of strange when you think about that air at higher elevations has to be moving faster to keep up with the ground below it, because air moves up and down, right? Hot air rises, as we know, and cool air sinks, right? So how does the air speed up? When it's heated, it rises, but then it has to start moving faster. Now, even if it's only a little bit faster, the difference in these velocities, if you calculate them, isn't much, but they do have to be greater, or they will start to get left behind. So, how that is explained, I don't know. I haven't really found anything to talk about how the air has to be moving faster.
And neither have I. And this is without considering that at the poles, or near the poles, the air particles supposedly don't move at all. So there's not only differences between the atmosphere close to the Earth and high above, but there are also differences between north and south. Theories of a spinning Earth, and therefore a spinning atmosphere, don't match reality, they don't work, they don't make sense. 4. A pressurized system next to an unpressurized system without a barrier makes no sense. There is supposedly no physical barrier between our atmosphere and the supposed infinite vacuum of space above or around it. Spaceships and rockets fly in and out of our atmosphere all the time, right? So how is it that our tiny little atmosphere doesn't just get sucked out and everything else equalizes? Because in the real world, if you have a vacuum in one place and some kind of gas in another place, and you remove the barrier, that's precisely what happens. It equalizes. Gas next to a vacuum without a barrier makes no sense. And there's a chance I know what you're going to say, and I will address the theory of gravity soon enough. 5. Star trails make no sense. What we observe at night is that the North Star, Polaris, doesn't move, and the other stars circle around it. These are all long exposure camera shots. It's beautiful. but everything in the universe is supposed to be moving in all directions at insane speeds. And remember, the universe is supposed to be expanding, so everything is supposed to be moving away from each other.
NASA and modern astronomy say Polaris, the North Pole star, is somewhere between 323 and 434 light years, or about 2 quadrillion miles away from us. Firstly, note that is between 1.9 quadrillion to 2.6 quadrillion miles, making a difference of over 600 trillion miles. If modern astronomy cannot even agree on the distance to stars within hundreds of trillions of miles, perhaps their science is flawed and their theory needs re-examining. However, even granting them their obscurely distant stars, heliocentric astronomers cannot adequately explain how Polaris manages to always remain perfectly aligned straight above the North Pole.
So, for one, the North Star never moves. And for two, take a picture of the sky today and take a picture in 1 year's time, and everything will be in the exact same place, year after year after year. It's all cyclical, and it never deviates from these patterns. How can we even have star constellations if everything moves in all directions all of the time? Another thing, seeing the same stars during the summer as during the winter also doesn't make sense. Just look at this image for a while. In summer, this is your night sky. On the other side of the sun, of course. In winter, you look the other way at night. You should not be able to see the same stars at all 6 months apart. But you do. The stars and their movement make no sense in the heliocentric model. 6. Seasons make no sense. Do you know how seasons are set to work? Officially, let's look at NASA again, it's because the north-south axis of the Earth is a little bit tilted in relation to the center of the entire solar system. The sunlight from 90 million miles away hits the Earth at a slightly different angle at different times of the year, and that's what can make the difference, in places, of a nice warm daily average of 25 degrees Celsius during the day in summer and a freezing minus 25 degrees in the winter. Right, that doesn't make sense to me. At such an insane distance, I don't see how such a small difference in angle can have any influence at all. So the Earth is said to move in an elliptical course around the Sun, but it seems like the distance to the Sun is completely irrelevant, as in the Northern Hemisphere, the Earth is actually 3 million miles further away from the Sun in the summer, and it's 3 million miles closer in the winter. That doesn't make sense. The Sun radiates heat. In the real world, the closer you are to a radiant heat source, the warmer it is. That's obvious, no? Seasons make no sense the way they're explained to us. 7. The dark side of the moon makes no sense. This is supposedly what is happening.
When looking at the moon from Earth, why do we only see one side? Have humanity visited the far side, and if so, how does it compare with the near side? The Earth completes one orbit of the Sun every 365 days, a year, and one rotation around its axis every 24 hours, a day. The Moon completes one revolution of its axis and one orbit of the Earth every 27.3 days. So even though the Moon is in a constant state of rotation, it always presents the same side to Earth. This phenomenon, known as synchronous rotation, ensuring that Earth always faces the near side of the Moon.
Now, of course, if the speeds of objects were really due to random occurrences, if the moon is really a rock that smashed and got round and smooth through millions of years of rotation in a frictionless environment, well, there's still infinitely more chance of winning the lottery than the speed of the rotation of the moon to precisely be so that we never see the other side. But fine, I guess just like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, nothing is impossible, it's just highly improbable. And there is some explanation that millions of years ago it was rotating all over the place, but the Earth's gravity, there we go again, somehow stabilized it. Again, I'll get to gravity, okay? There is a problem though in the world of physics, namely the three-body problem, which also applies to the Sun, Earth and Moon. I'll play a clip of a TED talk first. That's what smart people pay attention to, no?
Astrophysicists refer to this astonishing property of gravitational systems as the n-body problem. While we have equations that can completely predict the motions of two gravitating masses, our analytical tools fall short when faced with more populated systems. It's actually impossible to write down all the terms of a general formula that can exactly describe the motion of three or more gravitating objects. Why? The issue lies in how many unknown variables an n-body system contains.
And blah blah blah, so even in this age of supercomputers, we can't model the movements of three objects that attract each other through gravity. Here's that word again. Let's watch another clip. Could it possibly be that it can't be modeled because it just doesn't add up?
In the heliocentric model of the cosmos, the moon revolves around the Earth 13 times per year, traveling at 2,288 miles per hour, while the Earth revolves around the Sun once per year, traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. The following model and animation illustrate how this is supposed to occur. As you can see, since the moon is revolving around the Earth, which itself is revolving around the Sun, in order to maintain its regular orbit, the moon would have to be constantly and drastically changing its speed in ways completely unaccounted for by the model. In the outer part of its orbit, the moon would have to speed up 67,000 miles per hour, in addition to its regular speed of 2,288 miles per hour, just to keep up with the Earth. So the moon would then be traveling at 69,288 miles per hour when it reached the front of the Earth. At this point, since the moon is allegedly 240,000 miles away from the Earth would catch up in just 4 hours, so the moon must continue traveling 67,000 miles per hour along Earth's trajectory, while simultaneously continuing its now perpendicular 2,288 mile per hour second trajectory. Then, as it turns to reach the inner part of its orbit, the moon must now slow back down to its original speed, allowing the Earth to pass by. Lastly, as it passes behind the Earth, the moon must once again quickly accelerate back up to nearly 70,000 miles per hour before getting left in the dust.
My point is that it makes no sense how this ball can spin, speed up, slow down, and only ever phase the same way in relation to us. 8. Moonlight makes no sense. This is another big one in my view. Look at it. Look at it. Here's another quote. Early 20th century French writer. I can't say that I've read any of his works, but this quote came to me at an important time when I was young, and it has stayed with me ever since. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. You've seen that moon ever since you were little. Take it in with new eyes. The light the moon emits is supposed to be the reflection of the light of the sun. The moon is supposed to be a dusty round rock, nothing more. Now, I would argue that in the real world, only extremely shiny surfaces reflect light, like glass or mirrors, for instance, or water maybe. And I would argue that in the real world, when light hits a reflective sphere, a ball, there would be a kind of hotspot for the light. And if the ball is moving, as the moon is said to do, then that hotspot would move with it. Look at it. What we see appears to be a uniformly lit disk. Now, I'm not claiming per se that the moon is a disk. I really have no idea what the moon is. But all I'm saying for now is that this is not a ball of dust that is reflecting sunlight. Keep looking. The light we see at night is very bright and very white. The sun is very yellow. In the real world, we also have yellow lights and white lights. One is described as warm and the other as cold. And here's another experiment many people have done. It turns out that the white moonlight is physically cooling, just as the sun is physically warming.
In direct sunlight, a thermometer will read higher than another thermometer placed in the shade. But in full, direct moonlight, a thermometer will read lower than another placed in the shade. If the sun's light is collected in a large lens and thrown to a focus point, it can create significant heat, while the moon's light, collected similarly, creates no heat. In the Lancet Medical Journal from March 14, 1856, particulars are given of several experiments which proved the moon's rays, when concentrated, can actually reduce the temperature upon a thermometer more than 8 degrees.
So, got a full moon and we've got a shadow. So let's do, in the light of the full moon, 16 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Fahrenheit, 13, 12, 12, yeah, okay. Here we are in the shadow. You can't see the shadow, but I am absolutely pointing it in the shadow. 22 degrees average, 22, 21, 22. Let's go outside. 18, 19. This is in the moonlight. 20, 19, 19. Also in the moonlight over here. 17, 15, 14. And this is in the shadow right here. Here's the base of the shadow. The base of the shadow, of course, since the moon's been rising, is the spot, yeah, right here, 24, 23 degrees. I'll make sure I'm in the shadow. Yeah, there we go. 19 degrees. 18, 17. Also in the moonlight. So, there you go.
My old work truck, and it's out here in direct moonlight. And I'm going to take my infrared thermometer with laser targeting, and I'm going to get a temperature in direct moonlight. 39 degrees. Now we're going to go over here in the shade. On this side of the truck, the moonlight cannot hit it, and the temperature 47.6. It's over 8 degrees warmer in the shade.
Objects in moonlight are colder than objects in the moon's shadow. Perhaps you could devise some experiment one night and verify this for yourself. All this, you guessed it, makes no sense. If you reflect sunlight on a mirror, it's still going to feel warm. It's not suddenly going to feel cold. Moonlight, being reflected sunlight, makes no sense. 9. Second last one. Eclipses make no sense. Right. The subject of eclipses is a tricky one, and I have seen people spending up to 2 hours discussing them and explaining why they don't make sense in the heliocentric model. It can get pretty complex. Anyway, let's watch.
Many people think that modern astronomy's ability to accurately predict lunar and solar eclipses is a result and proof positive of the heliocentric theory of the universe. The fact of the matter, however, is that eclipses have been accurately predicted by cultures worldwide for thousands of years before the heliocentric ball Earth was even a glimmer in Copernicus's imagination. Ptolemy in the 1st century AD accurately predicted eclipses for 600 years on the basis of a flat, stationary Earth with equal precision as anyone living today. All the way back in 600 BC, Thales accurately predicted an eclipse which ended the war between the Medes and the Lydians, and as far back as 3,000 years ago, the Chaldeans, Egyptians, Indians, Chinese, and others accurately predicted eclipses to within seconds of modern methods. Eclipses happen regularly, with precision, in 18-year cycles, so regardless of geocentric or heliocentric, flat or globe Earth cosmologies, eclipses can be accurately calculated independent of such factors. Another assumption and supposed proof of Earth's globular shape, heliocentrists claim that lunar eclipses are caused by the shadow of their ball Earth occulting the moon. The idea is that the sun, earth, and moon spheres perfectly align like 3 billiard balls in a row so that the sun's light casts the Earth's shadow onto the moon. Unfortunately for them, this explanation is rendered completely invalid due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the sun and moon are still visible together above the horizon. But for the sun's light to be casting Earth's shadow onto the moon, the 3 bodies must be aligned in a straight 180-degree syzygy. As early as the time of Pliny, there are records of lunar eclipses happening while both the sun and moon are visible in the sky together, and it continues happening during lunar eclipses to this day. In an attempt to explain away the inconsistencies in their theory, heliocentrists usually claim light refraction must be happening on a scale large enough to account for the phenomena. But even if this highly implausible, reverse-engineered damage control explanation is accepted, it cannot explain how Earthbound observers are supposedly able to see 12,000 miles, 180 degrees around a globular Earth to objects on the other side. The reality is, eclipses are a far more occult and mysterious phenomenon than lining up 3 billiard balls. Lunar eclipses only occur during full moons, when the moon is at the crossing point of the ecliptic opposite the sun, and solar eclipses only occur during new moons, when the moon is at the crossing point of the ecliptic and aligned with the sun. Such solar and lunar conjunctions and oppositions happen a minimum of 4 times per solar year, and depending on their exact altitudes and observer location, will produce partial, total, or annular eclipses. In ancient cosmology, these lunar nodes and accompanying eclipses were personified as the gods Rahu and Ketu, often shown devouring the sun or moon. During solar eclipses, the new moon conjunction directly crosses the sun, causing the blackout effect, and during lunar eclipses, the full moon opposition to the sun causes the shadowy red tint. This phenomenon is wholly celestial, involving the luminaries and their regular interactions with one another, and not in any way terrestrial, involving the earth beneath our feet, causing upward casting shadows into the heavens.
And then there's this problem with solar eclipses. It's like, sure, we can see a black shadow in the sun, but we can't make out the outline of the full moon. I know that's a terrible circle, sorry. These eclipses happen at the same time as the new moon, so it seems reasonable to say that this shadow is indeed the new moon. I guess my problem is the problem of the new moon in general, which is, where is the moon during the new moon phase? I get that the official explanation is that we can't see it because its dark side is facing us. But I mean, it really disappears. It is nowhere to be found in the sky. You're not going to find pictures of the new moon. But during the other phases, you can still see the circular outline, no? So does it never block out other stars you should be able to see at night? And so it seems with these eclipses. There's just nothing there. No glare, no outline. It's odd. And the last problem I came across is the trajectory of the shadow. In reality, the shadow of the moon moves west to east across our land. But that doesn't seem to match the theories. Okay, you get it. Eclipses don't make sense in the heliocentric model. And our last one on our top 10 lists, gravity. Finally, the theory of gravity makes no sense. Supposedly, all matter is imbued with a magic force that attracts other matter. The larger the object, the stronger the magic force. Because the Earth is so much larger than everything else in our world, everything is attracted to the center of the Earth. Now, how we know what is in the center of the Earth, I don't know. The deepest hole we dug is 8 miles deep, which doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. But anyway, officially, we don't know what gravity is, though.
What is gravity?
You have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
Which is fine. I don't mind admitting we don't know something, as opposed to clinging on to false certainties. So, of course, gravity seems to make sense. Things fall down, and we can measure how fast things fall, etc. Except if the apple falls due to a mysterious force inside another large object, then what makes helium rise? Air bubbles in water. In the real world, we see matter rising or falling depending on the medium they are in. If the object is denser than the medium it's in, it falls. If it's less dense, it rises. It looks for balance, density and buoyancy. So, if the theory of gravity explains objects being pulled down, Again, what is it that pulls things up? It would be possible to spend an hour on this subject, but from everything else we've seen, it should be apparent that the theory of gravity only exists to explain the heliocentric theory. It's all theory. Watch.
So they have to put it as far as possible in the model so that we can see the light rays parallel to each other from Earth. So that means that if the sun is 93 million miles away, the difference between the parallel lines will be immeasurable. The further away the sun is, the better your math will work, and no one will know what they are doing. But if you ask them how they triangulated the sun, they will get nervous, because they will have to use the fake trip to the moon. They only need the size when it comes to an eclipse, but when it comes to angles, they only deal with the sun as a point, because the size of the sun can be determined as long as you have the distance. If you have the distance, you have the size. If you have the size, you have the distance. That's all. So if you modify the distance, you have to modify the size. This is how it works. In fact, the distance to the sun has always changed throughout history. And every time they change the distance to the sun, they readjust everything else. But something strange happened in 2017 in the largest eclipse of the year over the United States. On August 21st, on their own website, they said that the duration of the eclipse is 5 hours. So if you do the calculations of the globe model, you will see that the eclipse should only last 4 hours and something. So with this eclipse, they have almost an hour to spare, and they know it. At that time, several NASA scientists began to say that the sun is much larger than they thought. They admitted that they need to increase the size of the sun to make the eclipse and the math match reality. The news came out in different media, and several notes were replicated. They said that the sun was 250 times bigger than the actual size they have told us. But now, those news articles disappeared from the internet, and all we can find now is that NASA scientists say that the size of the sun has to be a bit bigger so the eclipse calculations can work more precisely. This is very relevant, because what they are clearly saying is that the size of the sun is a theory, and of course, the distance to it is also a theory, but most people do not know about this.
I am asking the question, is theoretical physics actually pseudoscience? Seems easy enough, but I don't want to simply tell you the answer. I'm sure you know my opinion, but rather I will provide you with the evidence and then allow you to formulate your own opinion or your own answer to the question. So let's get started. First, what is theoretical physics? Well, theoretical physics uses math and theory in order to come up with or derive the fundamental laws of nature and to make conclusions from these laws. Yep, ideas and mathematics giving little to no weight to experiments or observations. Sounds fun, huh? Books have been written and questions have been asked because to some it has become obvious that physics has been stuck for years because the belief in beauty and math have become so dogmatic that it now conflicts with scientific objectivity. That a focus on mathematical elegance rather than reality has led the so-called science astray. It reminds me of a quote from Nikola Tesla, who of course was a real scientist, not a theoretical physicist, who said, "The scientists from Franklin to Morse were clear thinkers and did not produce erroneous theories. The scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality." Nikola Tesla. Things like dark matter, string theory, the Big Bang, quantum gravity, relativity, and so much more have all come from the minds of theoretical physicists. Let's list some of these theoretical physicists because maybe you've heard of some of them. Nicholas Copernicus, who formulated the Copernican principle that the Earth or human beings could not possibly be in a privileged position in the universe. Or Giordano Bruno, who told us that the stars are just like other suns. Or Galileo Galilei, who pushed the ideas of heliocentrism. Or Johannes Kepler, who came up with mathematical laws of planetary motion. Or Isaac Newton, whose cannon-shooting thought experiment gave rise to gravity. Or Christian Huygens, who in 1653 came up with the distance from Earth to the Sun when he guessed, yes, guessed, they say correctly by chance, the size of Venus, allowing him to measure the Earth to the Sun distance. Or Father George Lemaitre, the Jesuit, who came up with the idea of the Big Bang. Or Henry Cavendish, who used balls in his shed to correctly come up with the mass and weight of the Earth. Or Max Planck, who was the originator of the quantum theory. Or Albert Einstein in relativity and the bending of space-time. To more recently, Lawrence Krauss, who tells us that something can come from nothing if you have gravity. Or Michio Kaku, who tells us all about string theory. Of course, there are thousands more. To see a pretty decent list, check out the link in the description to Wikipedia, where you can see the many other names like Stephen Hawking, Richard Feynman, Ernst Mach, Max Born, Ernest Rutherford, James Clerk Maxwell. The list goes on and on. But I want to come back to one in particular to help us answer our question, and that is Michio Kaku. In a recent interview, Michio Kaku said the following. Now listen carefully, as I believe he gives us the answer pretty much straight up.
You're not going to believe this. In science, we always say that you make observations, you have a theory, you go make more observations, and it's a very, very tedious process. Wrong. Nobody that I know of in my field uses the so-called scientific method. In our field, it's by the seat of your pants. It's leaps of logic. It's guesswork.
In that quote, I believe we find our answer. He said, plain as day, that nobody that he knows of in his field, and his field is theoretical physics, uses the so-called scientific method. Why is that so important? Well, it is so important because when we look at the definition of pseudoscience, we see clearly and everywhere that by definition, pseudoscience is a collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on the scientific method. Yes, pseudoscience consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that are claimed to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. One more time, in case you missed it, from Michio Kaku himself.
Wrong. Nobody that I know of in my field uses the so-called scientific method.
And when you don't use the scientific method, what you practice is no longer called science. It's simply called pseudoscience.
Most scientists have no clue themselves. They've been brainwashed to death during their so-called education, but by virtue of everything we've seen, some must know that much of what passes off as science is a kind of dark religion. It's a kind of sorcery, really, using numbers as trickery to fool the minds of ordinary people. Okay. You claim that the Earth is a globe. It's what you've been taught, and you believe it. Yet you can't experience it for yourself. The people who supposedly can are liars. So why should you trust what they have to say? And the globe theories don't add up. The globe is a belief. Let that sink in. It's a belief. But it's wrong. This is just not where you are. Claiming the Earth is a globe without proof, and while your senses tell you otherwise, is stupid. But I'll cut you some slack. You've been watching this presentation, but it might take a few weeks to process. It takes a while to undo decades of brainwashing. Here's another quote. German 19th century philosopher. Again, I can't say I know anything about him, but I know the quote. Perhaps I'll read more old books in time. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. I've certainly been there. Second, it is violently opposed. Well, in my case, it wasn't that violent because I'd been through this process before, but I can remember other uncomfortable truths in my life I violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Well, yeah, water is level. The horizon is horizontal. This woman is not moving. Apart from when there are earthquakes or landslides, the earth doesn't move. The twinkly lights in the sky circle around the North Pole, which is fixed in relation to us. There are 2 main objects in the sky, they have comparable trajectories, and they appear to be the same size, so I have no reason to think that one is thousands and thousands of times bigger than the other one. It's all pretty self-evident indeed. And then, when you'll have processed all that, you'll be in a pickle. Because if you speak about it, which would be natural, you will lose any and all respect you have from people in your life. People don't want to know. They just don't. That's okay. Before I wrap this up, with a few final thoughts, mainly on what I chose not to talk about, I have one last bonus section about things that don't make sense. We push on a little bit longer. First off, some of these scientists sound very intelligent when they're talking about quantum string space-time matter. But I'm telling you, some of the astronauts sound really dumb. We've seen this guy drink CGI coffee and whack a fly on the ISS. When asked a few years ago why we haven't been back to the moon yet, he had this to say.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
And again?
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
That's like, my dog ate my homework. What technology is he talking about? What were we supposedly able to do technologically in the 1960s when computers were made of audio cassettes or something, and you needed a massive room full of them to do a simple little calculation? What were we able to do then that we can't do now? And like when has this ever happened in modern times anyway, where we regressed technologically? And then, what did he say? Did people at NASA destroy said technology? Why? How? And it's painful to build it back again. NASA gets like $100 million tax dollars a day. Stop whinging and get on with it, would you? So why haven't we gone back to the moon, actually? Come to think of it. In the 1960s and 1970s, we went every 6 months. It was great. It was fun. It was like a trip to the beach in summer. The presidents keep talking about going back anyway.
The directive I'm signing today will refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery. It marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use. This time, we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond.
Our third goal is to return to the moon by 2020 as the launching point for missions beyond.
Well, 2020 came and went. There are always delays and problems, and Obama, here with some of these scientism propagandists, he didn't want to bother with the moon. He said we should land men on an asteroid next time. And he also came up with lots of targets that were never met. So why is all of this so hard now when it was so easy then? Why does Buzz Aldrin think we haven't been back?
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there. And that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen. Did he just tell a little girl they didn't go to the moon? I think the doctors messed up his medication that day. Anyway, you know my thoughts on the charade of the moon landings. This next guy will help you see the moon landings with new eyes as well.
Hello, look what I have. I have the lunar lander, one of the lunar landers that landed on the moon. This is definitely one of the lunar landers that landed on the moon. It's not something made for a school play by the art department or anything like this. So, we're going to make some observations. Observation number 1, no windows. So, there's no air pressure on the moon, so they can't use a barometric altimeter. So, how do they know how far they are from the surface of the moon? Don't know. Maybe this is why they didn't have to use this. The jet here in the bottom, you see how there is no little sign here of disturbance? There is no little crater or anything. No, it's because the gravity is only 1/6, so it could just fall gently. So, okay, so it falls gently. Now, let's have a closer look. Let's do this. And let's see, what material is this? What is this? With all this buckling. And let's look closer. Look, you see here at the top, they started with very good intentions. They said, we are going to make this look very neat and everything will be very great, okay? And they have these bendy over things that they put a nail through. Dun, 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 dun. And then they just ran out. They ran out of them. So they just use a press-on stud. And here is a very important bendy thing. They had another one, so they use it here. And some more press-on stud. You can see by this shape here, the highlight here, you see, and the little bit of highlight here, compared to the low light here and the highlight here. You can tell that this is a thin material. It's not a thick material like drywall, plastering, something. No, this is more like parcel paper, okay? So, another nail here, another nail here, another one here, and some more buckling. Look at this buckling. Whoa, it's a like big S shape. So this not look like very much like precision engineering. Look at this. It's a bit too big. And look, not even a straight line. So look here, again, a bit of mistake. There are two kinds of artists in the world. There are the artists that like to draw freehand, and then there are the artists that like to draw with a ruler. And artists that like to draw with a ruler because they they are jealous of the people that can draw freehand. So what they do is they make extra lines. They put extra angles like this. They like to do this. It's to compensate, you know. So they do all these things just because they like to use the ruler, and they like to say, look, I can do octagonal shape here, and then I can work out how to do the shapes that converge on a point, and they are very proud of this. But this looked like it was designed by somebody who is kind of good with a ruler, but not very good with aesthetics, or not very good with dynamics, and not very good with fluid line. Now, let's look at one more thing. Do you see these things here, the padding here, with the press studs? This looks like a BMX card for the crossbar, but it's too thick, it's not for a real BMX. But look, here, press stud. Okay, and here, press stud. But here, tape. And here, not even tape. This is like the rubber padding that you get for things. Can you see? You can see the gap there and there. Okay? And people will say, you're stupid, this is for heat resistance. It's like, okay, if this is for heat resistance, why they use cardboard here? This doesn't look like very heat resistance. But anyway, this with the buttons, something very important for him to do. In this part of the lunar lander that stayed on the moon, because this is the part that went off when the camera was filming, and people say, so who was using the camera? And people say, oh, it was the people in ground control controlling it remotely. Like, wow, mega long distance remote control, huh? But anyway, so this gold framing this box, this would have acted like a capacitor when they were going through the Van Allen radiation belt. So all this heating proofing here, it doesn't matter. This here would have made the whole thing melt.
I'll stop him there, but on his last point, yeah, the upper atmosphere is said to be around 2000 degrees Celsius, and many metals supposedly used in spacecraft melt at those temperatures. You know what else NASA has done with regards to the moon landings? They lost all video footage. The most important achievement in human history. They lost the tapes. So there was a big search for the original tapes around the year 2000 or so, and NASA had to conclude in official statements that they reused the old tapes because they'd run out of empty tapes, and so they just taped over them. That sounds believable. Or there's this as well.
And when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
Whilst
from
in
Mark
space,
Cameron. This is from Mark Cameron.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
Yeah.
All
because
the
you can
time.
see. So you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Yeah. It's not a black
cool
void.
thing.
I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day. Stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
When you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
You don't see stars in the daytime on Earth. Not because they're not there, but because the atmosphere is aglow with scattered light from the sun. If you take away the atmosphere, the sun will still be there, but the sky goes dark. That's what the folks get when they go to the edge of the atmosphere, and they're calling that the edge of space. But when you get to the edge of the atmosphere is no longer between you and the rest of the universe, and the stars reveal themselves just as they would at night.
And we could not see stars.
The sky, of course, was black, but it had sort of a velvet sheen to it.
The biggest visual surprise was just how black the sky was. You have a brilliant sun, brighter than any sun you normally would see, even here in New Mexico. You have these extraordinarily high mountains. We were in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon. But then you have this black sky, a sky blacker than black, as the old Vidicon expression used to be.
Since the moon has no atmosphere, then a daytime picture If you're there in the daytime of the moon, you see a full night sky of stars.
But then you have this black sky, a sky blacker than black.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
You see the gas.
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
So you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Yeah. It's not a black void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
They're brighter, but they're different. A lot of things different about them. One, you don't have the atmospheric distortion, so they don't twinkle, right? So you see lots of points, and you see lots of points, and that literally millions of them. And I live in Colorado, and you get up on a clear night in Colorado, up in the mountains where there's no light, and you can see all these stars.
Just the inherent beauty of it, the velvet, bottomless bucket of the universe.
In like just hanging there in a vast sea of darkness, and the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
We'll multiply that by 1,000.
And we have to realize that in space, without the intervening atmosphere, the heavens are 10 times as bright, stars 10 times as numerous.
Sea of darkness.
Okay, well, at least they got their story straight. So, I've extensively shown you the cables and the harnesses, the CGI.
How about this? Why don't we see any land when we're looking down at the ocean from the space station?
Why? Because you're over top of ocean.
Okay, well, don't you think they could be fooling us with this picture?
Okay, I give you this.
Wait, watch the picture.
I know that.
Watch the picture.
I know
watch
that they've airbrushed some stuff.
It's not
up.
airbrushed. This is us in our front yard on a solar panel, and we tricked you, showing you how easy. We have zero budget. They have $65 million a day, and I tricked you. Okay, I tricked you. I'm sorry I had to trick you.
But then there's also the pool. NASA have a full-sized replica of the International Space Station in a swimming pool. And that's supposedly so the astronauts can practice their spacewalks, which seems fair enough. But I get suspicious when I find out that in some footage that is meant to show real spacewalks, there are bubbles. Bubbles in space. What else? In 1986, this happened. A shuttle exploded, with all the crew dying. People were understandably very upset about this. Except now it turns out they all had twin siblings, and those twin siblings are all living their best lives, working for universities, etc. And then, to change it a bit, I also want to show you the old maps. They're very interesting. There are lots of old maps that show the North Pole at the center and all the continents spread around it. And that would work with the magnetic compass actually. North is the center, and so from any point on this map, your compass will point towards that center. East and west also work, so circumnavigation on the Earth would really just be doing a circle, but it's just south. That would mean going away from the center instead of going towards an imaginary point at the bottom of a ball. And with these maps, it's interesting that the modern maps of, say, the United Nations or the World Health Organization actually also use that map. There's old books as well, 19th century stuff, talking about much of what I presented here, except for the NASA rubbish, of course. Theories of heliocentrism certainly weren't universally accepted. There was a lot of pushback by sane, thinking people in those days, but it seems that, just like today, through mass media, newspapers at the time, and the education system, there was a successful campaign to ridicule the sane thinkers and to impose a certain worldview. And so it is today. I mean, once you have exclusive access to children's education, if you're patient and determined, you can really mold society any way you want. It just takes a bit of time.
Ruth, and how old are you today?
102.
102. So you were born in
1918.
1918. And we were just talking, and I asked you what shape the Earth is, and what did you say? What were you taught in school in elementary school?
I was taught in school that the Earth was flat.
And then what do you remember when they changed it to a globe?
Well, when they changed it, I remember when they changed it, but I can't remember the date or anything like that.
And did you believe them?
Yes, I did.
You did. Now,
I was young.
Right, and we all were told by people that we trust.
Also, it seems that every single society in the world, until those few modern scientists came along, had the same or comparable understanding of our place in the world. And it's typical of our arrogance in today's world that we dismiss everything that came before. It seems that for the last 10 years, through the internet, many people have rediscovered old ideas and are testing for themselves whether what they've been taught is true. But, and this is true for every single topic, if your understanding or opinion goes against the orthodoxy, you will be ridiculed, shunned, or ostracized. There is no place in society for you. Having seen this, if you now start thinking about this subject, you will first be exposed to the Google algorithm. You will not find calm, reasonable debates between people of different views. You will instead find videos that say that such and such flat earther got destroyed, or you will find endless amount of content ridiculing the whole notion. And I get it, that's just how it works. But you will struggle to find good quality presentations on the subjects I'm presenting here today. It won't come up in the search engines. You will have to put in some effort and dig. It's curious, well it's not, it makes perfect sense, how so-called influencers are including the topic. So these guys have fun videos about trick shots. And then you have this.
Let's bottle bust with a pigskin.
That was weird. I shouldn't have done that. That crossed the line. I apologize.
So do you know that he's a flat earth guy?
What are you talking about?
He'll tell you he's not, he's scared to tell people, but he really is.
Which is crazy, because it's obviously spherical.
I'm kidding. He's a spherical earth guy. There's nothing to worry about here.
Know. But why do you believe it's flat?
And a few years later, there's this video, I showed a clip of it before, where one of them goes to space aboard Jeff Bezos' craft. Anyway, I won't start talking about celebrity culture, if you can call it that. So, I didn't talk about satellites. Look it up for yourself. Think about it. It's good fun. I didn't talk about fly paths. No plane has ever flown over Antarctica, and flights, say, between South Africa, Chile, Australia, all take unusual routes. I didn't talk about the sticks and shadows from the Greeks from 2,000 years ago. Again, I don't know, look it up for yourself. I didn't talk about the notion of hidden lands.
I like to be an explorer, like the great Magellan.
Oh, you're too late. There's really nothing left to explore.
Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
I didn't talk about the Flat Earth Society, which is a weird one.
Nobody has a monopoly on what is a very hard problem, but I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
I wonder if it's even a real organization, because it just seems to be purposefully put there to sow confusion, as it mixes some good information with utter nonsense. No one I've ever come across is part of the Flat Earth Society, etc., etc. Look, once you see that the Earth is not a globe, well, it's not a big deal. Life goes on. But the implications are fascinating. So how do things work here on this physical plane then? Sunrise, sunset. What are the phases of the moon?
I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a piece of rock, but it is a plasma phenomena, cosmic plasma, and that this fact will eventually be confirmed.
What's the deal with Antarctica? I also didn't mention the Antarctic Treaty that was signed in 1959 by pretty much all countries, which forbids anyone to explore the area independently. What is up there? What is up there high in the sky? I have some answers, but I have many more questions myself. To talk about the implications, you'd also have to talk about psychology at the level of the individual, but you'd have to look at mass psychology, but also the psychology of the perpetrators. So you'd have to look at power in society and try and uncover that which is hidden. You'd have to look at history, of course. And religion. Religion's a big one. People who are not religious think they are not religious, but they are. Modernity, the technological society, has all the characteristics of a religion. Look, I know I could be wrong about all of this. That's always a possibility with everything. But what I have never, ever come across is anyone who sincerely acknowledges and understands everything I've spoken about here, who can demonstrate that they understand, and who also understands why it's only logical that someone like me would come to the conclusion I've come to, no, the Earth is not a globe, and who can then show me where I've gone wrong in my thinking or my observations. That has never happened. And if I watch a debate, it's always about isolated topics, but it's never about the subject as a whole. And the few debates I've seen are pointless. It's like politicians on TV. There's never a meeting of minds. There is never a sincere desire to learn from each other. It's just people sticking to their views and being condescending towards the other.
See it at the same time? So people looking south can't see the night sky at the same time?
David, if you understand what the flat earth model is, if somebody's in Santiago...
You don't have a model.
Listen.
Yeah?
Stop being a dick. Okay?
You stop being a dick. Your entire existence is being a dick to all of science.
And finally, the big one I didn't mention. Why the lie?
When confronted with the demonstrable evidence for our level Earth plane, one of the most common and frequently asked questions is, why would anyone lie about the shape of the Earth? Why would there be a worldwide conspiracy to hide the true dimensions of our home? What would be the point of hiding our level Earth to begin with? Many who ask this question haven't actually researched the subject and understand that those who aren't directly involved in the lie cannot fully comprehend the motives of those who are. Therefore, the often repeated phrase, "Why would they lie?" is more a cynical defense mechanism than a genuine question. So we cannot definitively answer the question of motive, but we can attempt to deduce and guess what it may be.
And on that one, well, maybe, if you've digested that the Earth is not a globe, just maybe we could have an exchange of ideas about why the lie. But first you have to accept that it's real. You have to see it for yourself. One last quote from a book I read when I was 20 by a South African spiritual teacher. Depending on his temperament, when faced with anything out of the ordinary, the bigot will ignore what has happened and pretend it never occurred. The sanctimonious man will accept the incident at face value, believing that he understands it all. The foolish man is forever puzzled by what has happened, not knowing whether to accept or reject the incident, and thus becomes obsessed with his questions. The author goes on to explain about the attitude of living life by challenge. The challenge is to avoid any of these three traps. If you've watched this far, there is a chance you still have a functioning mind and a healthy soul. That is getting rarer. Most people don't. And it's fine for people not to question things because we are tribal. We behave like a herd, and that's natural. It's just a shame the so-called leaders have turned their back on the herd and are leading people astray. It's also natural to have a few philosophers, a few thinkers. That doesn't make them any better. It's just who you are. So please, don't pretend you weren't exposed to this new information. And don't tell yourself stories. Don't fool yourself into this and that. in order to make it more comfortable. And do some research. Truth fears no investigation, but don't get obsessed with it. I don't think there's going to be a massive awakening, a sudden realization by the masses that we've all been lied to. And I don't think that the phenomenon of evil rulers is going to go away either. But this information could be useful in the future, I think, for yourself or for your children. Look, the Earth is not a globe, deal with it.